For people who don't know who you are, just can you give us like a background on how you got into journalism and what happened with you being involved in that Johns Hopkins psychedelic study?
Yeah. I was living in Baltimore, and I was living in Baltimore, and my background is in engineering, so I was actually working at a local hospital, installing and repairing medical equipment, and I got into journalism because a friend of mine, Baynard Woods, he was an editor at the Baltimore City paper, which is like an alt weekly. I'm guessing your audience knows what an alt weekly. Before the internet, all over the country, you'd have like the Tampa City paper, the Philadelphia City paper, the Baltimore City paper. And alt weeklies were a place to where non-credentialed journalists could write about the local scene, local bands and all of this, like the Village Voice is kind of the prototype.
Right.
So the Baltimore City paper is like legendary alt weekly. I met Baynard Woods, and he said, "Hey, I've been writing this column on country and bluegrass music, but they gave me a bunch of other work. Do you want to do it?" I was not a writer at all. In fact, I was making films at the time. And I said, "You know what, to hell with it. I love country and bluegrass." And I thought, why not? I'll try it. He thought I was a writer, I think. Okay. And I didn't say anything. So I was like, you know what, I'll try it. And if it sucks, they'll just fire me.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. And then every now and then they would send me a different assignment, go to the museum and write this up, or go to a concert and write the concert up, or interview this person. And so I started being like, man, this is fun. Compared to film, where you need a lot of money and 4 or 5 different people and all kinds of equipment, you need a pencil and a piece of paper or an iPhone, and you're ready to go. So I happen to live in Highlandtown in East Baltimore, and Bayview Hospital is the site of the Johns Hopkins Psychedelic Research Center. And so they advertised in the Baltimore City paper. And so there was like a novelty aspect when you write an article. You want to see your byline. To me, it was like, cool, I wrote an article. Look, my name's in the paper. So I was down in Fells Point at Bertha's Mussels with my friend Bernard, who was the bartender down there for years and years. And I was flipping through the paper looking for an article I wrote, and I passed a page, and it said, "Have you done psychedelic drugs? We will pay you to participate in a study looking into the effects of hallucinogens on mood and behavior," something like that. And so I immediately called. And I was thinking, the bureaucracy of Hopkins, will they ever get back, or will it happen? But somebody actually picked up. And he said, "Yeah, why don't you come up here next week and we'll talk?" And so I was like, okay. So I went up there, and they did they do a physical, they give you a drug test, and then they do essentially talk therapy before they let you know. They want to know about your background. They don't want somebody on a psychedelic study who has a history of mental illness. They don't want somebody who's a drug addict. A lot of the studies they want people who are naive, meaning you've never taken a psychedelic drug. This study was the first one they had done to where they specifically wanted people with experience. And I'd already taken LSD, psilocybin, many other psychedelics. And so I got into the study, and that's how I had already been interested in psychedelics for a long time. Terrence, standard stuff. Terrence McKenna, John C. Lilly, Timothy Leary, Robert Anton Wilson, just the standard stuff that you can buy at a New Age bookstore. That was my experience with psychedelics.
How old were you at the time?
I was probably 25.
You were 25.
Yeah. Well, when I finally entered the study, I probably was maybe 28.
Oh, really? It took 3 years for the time you saw it?
No. What I'm saying is, let's do the math. It was in 2014, so I was 29 or 30.
Okay.
When I did the study.
And what was it like when you applied for it and they brought you in, and like what was the process of being introduced into this? Yeah,
well, okay, so like I said, they interview you and make sure that you're a good fit, and they say, okay, this is a guy we can have. These things are heavily screened, right? You can't be over 50. They want a particular kind of person because they want a particular kind of result, right? So this study there was a whole list of psychedelics. They didn't say this is going to be psilocybin. They said it could be psilocybin, it could be LSD, it could be ketamine, it could be DXM, it could be any of these things because it's double blind. And so that was the onboarding process. And then they just tell you, show up I did it every Friday. You pick a day of the week. They run studies Monday through Friday. And they said, you're going to start every Friday at 8 a.m. until it's over. And I think there were 6 sessions, and you're going to get 1 placebo. And so I started one Friday. You show up at 8 a.m. There's very strict instructions. You can have like a banana for breakfast, but you can't go out to Denny's and get a Grand Slam or Uncle Herschel's at Cracker Barrel. They want your stomach mainly empty so that the drug takes effect very quickly. If not, you may get there and then at 3 p.m. they're like, what, you're still tripping. They're trying to. It's hard to do because, as you well know, it's hard to fit a psychedelic trip inside of strict lines of a business day. Like, well, you know, it's wrapped up, kill the trip, you know. And so sometimes, you know, one time I can tell you about, they had to kind of help me out of there because this was high doses of psychedelics. So one Friday, 8 a.m., I ate my banana, and I lived so close I walked up to Bayview Research Center. Now, some people out there, Johns Hopkins School of Medicine is the most prestigious medical institution in the country. The main, and it's a university. So downtown Baltimore, you've got the Homewood campus. And then by my house in East Baltimore, which is actually Greektown, which is ironic considering the context here. But Bayview Hospital has the National Institutes of Drug Abuse. They have the Joseph V. Brady Behavioral Biology Center, which is where we were at. Because remember, these are, people get confused. They think these are studies in drugs. They're not chopping up mushrooms and looking at them and putting under microscopes. They're studying religion, and they're studying human behavior. They're interested in the intersection of religion and human behavior. That's what the studies are looking at. They're looking into religious experience and mystical experience, though it's sold as a study looking into the effects of drugs. Okay.
Was there a point, like at what point did you start to question the drive behind the study and the intention behind the study?
Well, I got out of the study, and like most people, you know, I had 5 very powerful experiences. Though I had done psychedelics before, I never had anything remotely close to what I would call a mystical, spiritual, or religious experience. Taking drugs in one of these studies with a particular playlist, blindfold,
music
playlist that's intended to drive a particular type of experience. They're trying to cultivate a very particular kind of experience. They're not going to let you pick the playlist or just hang out and take drugs. It's not like going to Grateful Dead. So they are masters at inducing a particular kind of experience that they believe is therapeutic, and then studying the effects of the drugs. So when did I begin to question the aim of the study?
Yeah, and first of all, how long did you do? You did it for how long?
Well, it lasted several months because after one particularly powerful trip, it had weird effects on me. And Roland Griffiths said, let's wait a couple of weeks. And normally you do 5 in a row, 5 Fridays in a row. I ended up skipping a couple because of what happened in one session that was DXM.
What happened?
DXM is the active ingredient in Robitussin. And when I used to live in San Diego with a bunch of Navy guys, my brother was in the Navy, and they would do what's called robo-tripping. You just drink a bunch of Robitussin.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, it gives you like a strobing effect.
I've never done it, but I heard stories.
Yeah,
it's popular down here in Florida.
It is, yeah. It's popular everywhere. It's something kids can do, you know, go to the store and steal some Robitussin. And, you get
robo-tripping, baby.
Robo-tripping. So they gave me a really high dose, and it almost instantly after taking it, I laid down, I didn't feel good, and it just almost instantly popped me out of my body. And I kind of floated around the room and was seeing myself from different perspectives. And I could see the guides of the study, and I felt like I could see them from outside of my body, and I could hear them talking about me as if I wasn't in my body. And so it made my body feel very heavy, and then it felt like my consciousness floated out of my body. And then what happened was at night when I went home, I was having sleep paralysis. That night I went home and laid down, and in the middle of the night, you know, I lived in inner city Baltimore. It's pretty wild. And I heard somebody knocking at the door. I mean, it was the middle of the night. And I couldn't get up. I tried to get up, but instead something like my consciousness or something went down to the door, and I heard doop, 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 and I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't get up. This is a very common phenomenon, sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
And so I told them, because they call you the next morning like, hey, everything okay? And I was like, well, this thing happened. And they said, okay, let me have Roland call you back. And then he said, you know what, let's take a week off, just because that was kind of crazy. Yeah. And it had other really interesting effects too. It made my vision better. It has really strange effects. There's not a lot known about it. But they were doing psilocybin and DXM head to head.
And so you're saying, so what about the DXM is so similar to Robitussin?
That's the active ingredient.
That's the ingredient in Robitussin that causes the trip.
Yep. And you can buy it if you go to, I hate to say this, but if you're an adult and you want to try it, go to Amazon and you can buy pure DXM pills, as many as you want, for like a penny each.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But don't do it, because I will say.
Do not do that, folks. Do not do that.
Don't do it, because at high Doses, it can put lesions on your brain and turn you into essentially a vegetable. It's dangerous. Don't do it.
Holy shit. Okay, so
But I was in the
psilocybin and DXM are the two drugs that you were given.
Yep.
But did they tell you before they gave you that? or
No, it's double blind. So not even the people giving it to you know it. It's extremely strict. So they have the pharmacy come up and they have no idea what it's going to be. So they give you something and your guys
They don't even know.
They don't even know. It's double blind. They have no idea.
What do you think the difference was between the DXM and the psilocybin?
A huge difference, because like I told you, I thought it was ketamine. You know, I had done different psychedelics before, and I thought this is ketamine because I fell down. I was on the bed, and I felt like I was going to go under surgery. I thought it was an anesthetic, and it's unlike psilocybin. I mean, you know, the psilocybin experiences there followed a very kind of typical archetype. DXM doesn't do that. You won't get a mystical experience off of DXM.
Okay.
It's more like ketamine.
And the DXM made your vision better, you said?
The next day, I felt like I've worn glasses my whole life since I was a little kid. I felt like my vision was so much clearer and so much better. If there's some link between that, I don't know. I haven't really looked into it, but they want to know, look, you have to write a report after every session. And so I put that in there and everything else, because there were a number of effects that I thought, this is really bizarre.
Yeah.
Like I just didn't even have my glasses on, and for a while I just didn't even wear them.
Really?
Yeah.
With the whole thing combined, was there any sort of change you noticed in yourself after the full experiment was completed? Like, was there any sort of different outlook or any sort of different insight that you took from it?
Well, it gave me an enormous amount of enthusiasm, which is what the drugs do. It gives you an enormous amount of enthusiasm, and the immediate thing that not everybody, but many, many people have is everybody else has to do this. Everybody. All we have to do is find a way to do it, and then you get religion, because that's immediately what I thought. So I was writing articles, this is what we have to do. Everybody must do it. This is going to fix everything. I believed all of that stuff.
Why did you believe that, though? Why do you think you believed that?
Because of the nature of the experience. The nature of the experience gave me the idea that the problems in the world didn't result from any external political things or structures in the world. It had to do with a level of spiritual immaturity, I guess maybe you could say. But that the basic idea, which I wrote in an article, was that whatever obstacles were in my way as far as success and doing the things that I wanted to do and to feeling better were internal, were features of my psychology that could be worked out through one of these processes, through these drugs. So I felt that I had achieved new insight into myself. And by achieving new insight into myself, I achieved new insight into the world. It gives you a completely different perspective. You might call a mythological perspective on the world. This is extremely common.
Yeah.
And so this is why when you have these experiences, you start reading stuff like Jung. You start reading stuff like McKenna, who was really kind of an acolyte of Jung, because you go, oh, this is a totally different way of looking at the world.
Right.
It's the left-hand path. It's the esoteric path. So yeah, I definitely felt different. I had an enormous amount of enthusiasm, and I immediately said, this must be what's behind religion.